Hi, everybody. This is the HKCGI Corporate Governance Qualifying Program Examination Technique Workshop, Session 1B, Part 1. Okay. Today we will go through Section 1B, totally 4 parts, from Part 1 to Part 4. And then at the end, I will share with you, I will discuss with you all the past examination paper and discussion about the question and also how to attempt the question. Okay, the time is very tight, and therefore we need to go through parts by part. And then for this part 1, we will go through the corporate risk and risk management. And in the last section, for section 1, section 1A, Section 1A, we have discussed about the regulatory environment, and then for this time, for Section 1B, we will go through what is risk, what is the definition of risk, and then the strategies to control risk. What are the strategies? And then what is the risk management, and how to manage risk and case study problem, etc. Okay. Defining risk. The term risk has many different meanings depending on the context. And as we have discussed earlier, that for the corporate or the companies, it is difficult for them to avoid risk. We have to face risk in order to get the benefit. And that means the risk usually is will be harmful to our project and to our business, and therefore it will affect our objective. And assuming that the companies are profit-making company, and then it will affect the operation of the company. Okay, and then the term risk has many different meanings depending on the context, and risk may be defined in terms of exposure to danger or a threat that will affect us adversely. Okay, in the business world, risk is usually associated with the volatility of unexpected outcomes. Sometimes we call risk is uncertainty, but actually they have two different meanings, and they could lead to the loss of value, and it will be damages to individual. It will cause damages and loss to the company. And risk has always been viewed as negative because it will destroy the value of a company. With a focus on estimating the managing facts. Therefore, for risk management, usually it will focus on how to control risk, how to avoid threats, how to reduce our loss and damages because of the occurrence of certain risk event, okay, or the risk failure, and or control failure. And more recently, risk has also been seen as an opportunity to create value. However, some of the business companies they consider that risk actually is their opportunity, and then or they can make use of risk as their competitive edge. Typical example, banking industry or insurance industry. Okay, because the insurers will make use of the risk and then provide their business model or services. Typical example, the insurers or the insurance company during the COVID-19 period, they can come up with certain insurance packages, and then they will adjust their insurance premium in order to charge you to provide certain additional service or that you require, and in order to avoid or to cover the risk. In an organization setting, risks arise whenever a single decision or action. As shown in the this diagram, that actually you can get it in a study text, study material. for whatever decision or action, there will be various outcome A or outcome B or outcome C or outcome D. But of course, sometimes usually when outcome A occurs, then of course there won't be outcome B. But sometimes they are exclusive, mutually exclusive. But sometimes they may occur at the same time. It depends on the situations. And however, the meaning for uncertainty is actually still something unquantifiable. We cannot quantify uncertainty, but usually we can quantify risk based on certain statistical method, and we can estimate and forecast risk and come up with a certain degree of confidence of figures, and therefore we can make use of we can come up with the risk management. But usually we do not have figures to deal with uncertainty. How to define risk? Risk is defined as the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Effect of uncertainty on objectives. Okay. Usually the profit-making company or the business or even non-profit-making companies, they have to face risk, and they have to deal with the risk, and therefore they have to come up with the risk management, because risk event of when the risk event occur, it will affect their objectives, that is profit making, because usually they will averse to that unless you are the banking industry or the insurance companies. You're working with risk. Okay, but for general business world, the risk event will damage their value. Okay, or even for the charitable entities, the risk will affect their existence. Okay, because it will has a reversal effect on the objectives. Risk is an effect of the uncertainty on objectives. This definition is actually come from the ISO 31000. An effect is a deviation from the expected. Usually, they have this company or for business world, they have the objective, they want to make profit. Okay, and then the risk event will have the effect, will affect their working direction. Okay, it will has the adverse effect and deviating their route, and therefore they cannot come up with the expected outcome, making profit. Okay, it can be positive, negative, or both, and can address, create, or result in opportunities and threats. Okay, this is actually from the ISO 31000. In the past, risk has a positive effect, and then later on we have also in the past is a negative effect. It will affect our objective, but now they may have the positive effect. Okay, but usually what we deal with this concept is the negative effect, because we need to manage it, to control it, to avoid the risk event to occur, and that will affect our objective of the company. And risk is usually expressed in terms of risk sources. The source of the risk. The source of the risk, that is for example, the appointment to act as a director of a listed company. That is the appointment itself is a source, because you act as a company director. Or the vehicle. Okay, you own the vehicle, or you purchase a vehicle, a new one, and then traveling on the road. Actually, that is a source of risk, because they may come up with the crash, and that will you will cause somebody to injured, and you yourself after the vehicle crash you also injure. That is the risk. And then potential event, of course, when you're present in certain event, or when you're traveling in Europe, okay, there's a potential events, and then there will be the risk. because there is because in existing it is the geopolitical situation or the war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. Okay, this is a potential event, and their consequences and their likelihood. Risk is usually expressed in terms of the risk sources, potential events, their consequences, and the likelihood. What is the consequences and the likelihood of the risk? Because risk can be estimated for its magnitude and is defined by the consequences. That is, in the unlikely event when the risk event occur, what will be the damages and loss in terms of monetary value or non-monetary value? And then what is the likelihood for the probability that it will occur? And the consequence means an outcome of an event affecting objectives. Consequences, that is, when the event occur, what will be the result and what will be the damages or the loss, and that is the so-called consequences. A consequence can be certain or uncertain. Certain consequence is predictable. That is, it is expected to occur. But sometimes, some consequence may not be expected or unexpected consequences. And sometimes it is tangible, that is monetary value. But sometimes, for example, the reputation loss is intangible. Okay, beyond our measurement, we cannot measure, we cannot estimate the loss of reputation, and can have a positive. Sometimes consequence can have a positive or negative. Usually, we need to deal with the negative one. Okay, deal with the negative because it will cause the damages and the loss as a consequence. Consequences can be expressed in qualitatively or quantitatively. As I mentioned, if it is measurable in terms of monetary value, that is a tangible one, tangible consequences. But sometimes it is unquantifiable, but it still can qualify because qualitatively, because for example, reputation. Okay, any consequence can escalate through cascading and cumulative effects. The occurrence of certain damages will result in further damages. That is a cascading effect. An event means occurrence or changes of a particular set of circumstances. The events. For example, damages or injuries in car incident called car accidents. When you travel on the road, driving your car, and losses in sea flight or air flight transportation, the loss of a sea flight or the airplane crash, and you lost the passengers lost their lives, and then the flight transportation loss or launch failure of a satellite. Nowadays, the SpaceX very popular, and then the Long March launching vehicle in China, launch failure of a satellite, launching of a satellite from the Earth to the designated orbit in the space. An event can have one or more occurrences and can have several causes and several consequences. And for example, launching of a satellite, when we launch when we launching the satellite, even though it is successfully launched, but in the orbit, we will find that okay, actually the satellite cannot work properly. Okay, therefore it is no use or useless, even though we have successfully launched the satellite into space. Okay, one or more occurrence. An event can have one or more occurrence and can have several causes and several consequences. And also, when we launch the satellite, it will cause when the launching vehicles drop back to the Earth. it may cause damages to domestic households, okay, and cause damages and injuries to third parties. And therefore, when we launch the settler, usually we will cover the loss and third party loss and damages by third party liability insurance. Okay, an event can also be something that is expected which does not happen, or something that is not expected but does happen. Okay, therefore, an event when a risk event occur, sometimes it is expected. We already contemplate for this for the occurrence of this event, for this risk event. That is, we expect it will happen, but somehow it does not happen. Okay, that is, we prepare for the worst, but it has not come to the worst, or something that is not expected. However, usually the worst situation is that we have not estimated or we have not expected it occur, but it does occur. It does happen. Okay. For example, where vehicle, we have a new vehicle, and then we does not expect it will when the vehicle just where vehicle lost out of order on the road, but it's a new one. We never expect that it occurs, but it just out of order suddenly, and then we need to call for help in the middle of the road. Okay, and event can be a risk resource by itself. Okay, and then level of risk, materiality of risk. Risk can be classified as various level, and then in terms of its magnitude. Okay, sometimes we consider it's a small size of risk, but sometimes it's a large scale of risk, and therefore sometimes for example, for internal control, we will take it as a risk base. That means that we have to allocate our resources. Because of the limitation of resources, we have to focus on those high risk item, okay, high risk event, or the high risk issue. We have to handle. We have to focus on our management resources as well as the internal control resources or internal audit to focus on those high risk issue. Okay, therefore, we always call this as a risk base. Okay, therefore, we have to determine or distinguish for the low risk item from the high risk item, and then that means that we have to assess the risk. Therefore, we always call it a risk assessment. Now, how to assess the risk? It is by magnitude of risk. It is expressed in terms of a combined effect of likelihood of the occurrence, the particular risk event, of the occurrence of the particular risk event, and the impact in case that risk event occurs. This is the multiplication. Magnitude level of a risk equals to A times 3. Okay, that is how to determine the magnitude or the level of a risk. It is actually the combined effect of the probability of the occurrence of a particular risk event and the impact in case the risk event does occur. Okay, that is the magnitude. Likelihood means the probability. This is very straightforward under ISO 31000, and the impact means the outcome, to what extent of the event affecting the objective of a corporate or project, which can be in monetary terms in business world. And therefore, for the impact, usually is the probability. Usually, the impact is in terms of a monetary value. What will be the loss or the damages in the event that this risk event occur. That is, when the launching failure, when the satellite launch fail during the launching, what will be the loss? Actually, it's the total loss. We will discuss this case, and the loss will be, and loss and damages will be very, very large size, and therefore we need to consider for the business corporation debt or the business project, in case of the loss, what will be the impact? Can we sustain the loss? Can we have any measure to control our loss so that we can survive the loss? Magnitude can be expressed qualitative or quantitative. Okay, this extracted from Australian standard or New Zealand standard 4360 standard. Actually, is the even earlier than ISO 31000. Actually, the setting up of ISO 31000 is based on this Australian standard. Okay, in the left-hand side, the figure 6.1 qualitative representation of risk. That means how, based on the likelihood and the consequence, we can present the risk, the risk event, how it can be illustrated in the reports, or how we demonstrate the risk event, how the risk event affecting us. Okay, how the risk event affecting the business world or the business organization. But it is a very simple or qualitative representation, and because the consequence is distinguished as a minor or major, of course, it is a very simple illustration. And then for the probability and the likelihood, it is improbable or probable. And that is to come up with the four parts from low risk to high risk, and then in the middle, medium risk. And then at the right hand side is also to a certain extent qualitative representation, but it becomes an upgrade to a more sophisticated one, 3 times 3 and 9 grades of the risk event representations from red, green, and amber. And then it is extracted from annual report of listed companies in UK. The name is of this company is Carillion. It actually it has filed bankruptcy. Okay, and then because of liquidity problem, and then representation in the annual report to illustrate to the shareholders and the investment profit data based on the probability and the consequence. And of course, it's a bit exchange in the x-axis and the y-axis. Probability becomes the x-axis, and then the impact becomes the y-axis. But it doesn't matter. It's for just an illustration. And this one is a semi-quantitative representation, consequences and probability or frequency. For low risk, it's a low frequency and low consequences. And then for high risk is for high impact and high probability. Okay, and you can see the consequences is based on monetary value, but it is just for illustration. Each company can come up with their own representation based on the similar concept, consequences and probability. Okay, and then risk trade-off. This illustrates the trade-off between the level of risk and cost of reducing risk. That means the level cost of reducing risk. At the very beginning, we need to spend some money, and so that we can reduce or control the risk, reduce the level of risk. And that means that illustrate at the left-hand side here. That means illustrate that we can spend a little amount of money, we can significantly reduce the level of risk by the measure, reducing by the risk management system, and then by certain appropriate measure. And then we continue to expand and our costs in the reducing risk. We can continue to reduce the level of risk. And then ultimately, at the end, that even though we spend a lot of money, but we cannot continue to level same amount of risk or significant amount of risk. We can later on find that even though we spend a lot of money, we cannot further reduce the level of risk anymore. And it illustrates that sometimes we cannot totally remove the risk, or we cannot totally reduce, taking away all the risk. And ultimately, that means we have to stay with the risk. We can live on with the risk. That means that we have to face this last bit of the risk, the consequence, because sometimes we find that the level of risk cannot be totally removed, and then even though we spend a lot of money, for example we spend $10 million and ultimately find that the consequence will be even less than the money we spend for the risk management. Okay, if at that point of time, that means we spend $10 million for the risk management, but we found that in case of a risk event occur, the consequence is just $5 million. Okay, if that is the case, it's better for us not to do any risk management anymore, and because it becomes unjustifiable for that part of the last part of the risk management, unless the occurrence of the risk will affect the company reputation. If that is the case, that is another issue. Or the risk actually is a compliant risk, because if that becomes the company's obligations or the director's obligations to do the risk management, because it is a compliant risk, and therefore we cannot view this as the justification. And okay, this is the concept for the risk trade-off. And then risk perception. Risk can generally be quantified and assessed in terms of a probability, and magnitude. Okay, and then sometimes it's subject to the judgment of assessor and decision maker. For example, the directors. If the directors are not familiar with the risk, and it's difficult for them to make the judgment, appropriate judgment. And then it is whether the assessor is professional enough to determine the risk, to make your judgment. Therefore, it's quite we always need to consult the external advisor in dealing with this type of risk management. And the subjectivity in judgment are difficult to be avoided. A lot of factors that may affect the judgment and impose the biases, such as group thinking biases, peer group, authority biases, external professionals, or regulatory status quo. Okay, the existence is such. Why should we follow the past routes? Myopia bias, okay, is short-sighted. Short-sightedness of those directors. Okay, please refer to study material for details. Attachment. The starting point of the risk, attachment, and the termination of the risk, the end of the risk event. Attachment. Typical example: risk may be attached or assumed by several ways. We assume the risk by ownership. Okay, if you become the car owner or property owner, that means the risk of the property, because you become liable when or for example, when you're traveling on the road, speeding, okay, and then the transport department will come to you. Because you are the owner. They will ask you the question: who was driving? Who was the driver of the speeding when the speeding occurred? Okay, that is by ownership, because you become liable. And then and the property, for example, if you're a property owner and then the property drop something, the bricks come down, and then you are the owner. You have the responsibility or liability to handle, to repair, to keep the property in good condition. And then by contract, to prescribe risk responsibility or sharing, business contract, the insurance agreement. This is by contract. And it is in the clauses. This will still stipulate to prescribe who will be the party to be responsible on certain risk events. Okay. Therefore, we usually use a template of the contract to push all the risk to the opposite party. Okay. And then the trust, 信託 possession, 持有 agency 代理人 the establishment of the duties. When we sign the trust, when we become the trustee of the trust, or when the property or the asset is under your possession, or you become the agent of the principal, 代理人 and then by appointment, directorship, for example, by law and duty, the existence of duties. Okay. I think we need to be faster. I think we have discussed this. Okay, detachment, termination of risk. For example, risk can be shared by insurance policy. Example, car accident insurance. Shared by insurance. For example, we own the car, and then we take out the insurance policy to cover our loss in respect of the car. For example, the loss of the vehicle in a car crash, or we lost our car in a theft situation. It is stolen by somebody. Or risk can be transferred, or we cover our third-party liabilities when we cause injuries of trapezoids of a road user or passengers. Risk can be transferred by assignment or novation. We can transfer our risk by contract, by assigning the asset, or assigning the certain project to another body by assignment and novation. This can be terminated when the event has actually occurred. It has already occurred, then it will not occur again unless it can occur repeatedly. Okay, that means the risk will come out again. Therefore, it can be terminated by the occurrence of the event. It has already, it will occur already. It will not come out again. For example, the launch of a satellite. It was launched. It is already in the orbit, in the space. Risk can be terminated from perspective of insurers by the expiration of the validity period. For example, the insurance policy period expired. It's terminated. Risk can be terminated by resignation of directors. The directors, independent directors, resign and jump out of the boat, and then its liability is ended. This can be managed or transferred to the other parties by contract clauses. We have discussed this. Procurement, lease, and risk. I think for procurement transaction, usually it's always transfer. Always, that means that we have various categories of risk. And then for procurement, usually it's always transfer unless we keep certain warranty. For example, we purchase a vehicle and then the risk, it is a procurement, and then the risk always transfer except the warranty. The car dealer will, the car manufacturer will continue to provide. For example, for the coming 4 years or 3 years, certain warranty. Okay. And then for lease transaction, 租賃, not all of the risk will be transferred. They will keep part of the risk, and then transfer part of the risk. Usually they will keep they will keep the technical risk or investment risk. Whereas the business risk and operation risk will be transferred to the lessee. Okay, from the lessor to the lessee. That is the lease transaction, the 租賃. Okay, that is one how to distinguish. How to distinguish a procurement and a lease in terms of by referring to the risk. And then that is also the how we distinguish a finance lease and an operation lease. Therefore, risk is an important determining factor to distinguish whether a lease is finance lease and an operating lease. Okay, finance lease. The transfer of ownership and risk may not take place simultaneously. Okay. Sometimes we transfer the ownership. Okay, ownership is the source of risk. And we becomes the owner of a vehicle or the property, and then we become liable. Okay, that risk has been transferred because risk usually transfer or title risk usually transfer when the title is transferred. Okay, then we becomes the owner. Then we become liable. But sometimes risk will not be transferred at the same time as the title transfer. Title to the property is transferred. Sometimes it is even earlier than the title transfer. Typical example is the CIF or FOB sales. Risk of cargo is transferred. The risk is transferred to the buyer. However, the title, the ownership, has not yet been transferred to the owner because it has to go through the banking system. The bill of lading has not been handed over to the owner. Okay, the owner has not yet been obtained the title. That is the bill of lading. Various measures to control risk. Control, what is the meaning by control? Risk control. Control means measure that maintains and or modifies the risk. Under the ISO 31000. Control include but not limited to and process, policy, device, practice, and or other condition and or action which maintain and or modify risk. The meaning of risk control or risk, usually the risk control or risk management are interchangeably used in the risk management. And the risk management means coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regards to the risk. Okay, measures to control risk: avoidance, reduction, avoidance, that means that we avoid to go through this kind of route if we consider that this is a risky route. And reduction, taking action to reduce the likelihood or impact relating to the risk due satellite launch. We'll come to this. Alternative action, take the feasible step to minimize avoid risk of failure. Parallel action. Contract, we have talked about this. We transfer the risk to the maximum extent to the opposite party. For example, if we purchase certain supply, certain material or service from a suppliers, we come up with the suppliers contract, and then we will push all the risk to the opposite party. Likewise, it will be the same when we sign contract with a customer. We will push all the risk to by the contract clause to the customers, and therefore we usually make use of the template of the contract, because the template will allocate all the risk, will push all the risk to the opposite party, to the customer, to the suppliers, in order to minimize the risk of the company. We share. It means, for example, the crop deal of the loan arrangement with the financial institution, or the setting up joint venture to run the business. We share our benefit of the project by sharing our risk with the partners. As by insurance, taking out the third-party liability insurance, the comprehensive insurance of a vehicle, or when we launch a satellite into the orbit by the launching insurance or third-party liability insurance. Mitigation, reduce the impact related to the risk. Crisis management, backup by the data center. Crisis management, continuity plan, or setting up a very comprehensive risk management system, and then accept no action is taken. But sometimes no action, as we have discussed earlier, that we will find that somehow when we put a lot of resources, but we cannot further reduce the risk, then at that point, we understand that we have to accept the risk. Categories of corporate risk. What are these corporate risks? Possible risks. What are the possible risks faced by the company? There are two external source of risk, external sources and internal sources. Okay, external. Policy change of government, trade war, political risk due to change of government office, market competition, change of guidelines, rules, regulations, or laws, outbreak of war, pandemic, change of technology, etc. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list of an external source. But when these situations occur, that means there will be the change in the risk level. We need to assess the risk again. And therefore, for the listed companies, they are required to review the risk level on a regular basis, at least once every year, because we need to review or to assess the risk as registered in the risk register. Okay, that are the principal risks or the emerging risks that will affect the success of the company. Okay, for the internal source of risk, change of management team member, change of directors, change of company policy, financial stress, increase of the sales commitment, public target, change of internal auditors, etc. When this occurs, that means that our risk level has been changed, and that will affect the risk magnitude, and we need to assess the risk, and if necessary, take up the risk management. or the procedures. The categories of corporate risk and is generally divided into various categories, and it is quite common to come up with 4 categories. For example, compliant risk or the mandatory risk. For example, listed companies, they have to comply with certain laws and regulations, especially listing rules or the Securities and Futures Ordinance, and the company ordinance. And then hazard risk, pure risk, internal control failure, operation failure, usually for internal failure. And then control risk, that is externally, a car accident, outbreak of war. And then opportunity, that is the project failure, business failure, or the speculative risk. Compliant risk, usually associated with law, rules, regulations, license, permits, leases, captures legal and financial penalties for failing to act or acting inappropriately. For example, listed companies, usually they need to comply with certain rules and regulations, and then and in the event that the company fail to comply with the listed this kind of rules and regulations. Typical example, when the listed company fail to disclose inside information in a timely manner as required by the Securities and Futures Ordinance, Chapter 571. Okay, then that is it is fail to comply with these rules and regulations, and the consequence is that the companies as well as the directors will be liable to the failure. Okay, liable, and the maximum penalty will be a fine of 8 million Hong Kong dollars. Okay, and then usually for those regulated business licensed with specific terms, example telecom operators, they have to work under certain license, and then its license is under the license that they under certain compliance obligations to, for example, provide information to the telecommunication of Office of Telecommunication, Office of Communications, OFCA. That is and then for example, health laboratory is under the license, and then broadcasting under the broadcasting license. Okay, these companies under the listing rules and SFO, and then serious consequence for failures. Usually, failure, this compliance failure will result in very serious consequences, and then the tarnishing to the company's reputation, and then has a very, very serious judicial effect on the ongoing sustainability. And then last but not least is the company reputation may heavily tarnished for any scandal. Hazard risk is usually the internal risk. Usually it's the usually it's the operational risk. Internal control risk is hazard that will affect the company's operation, and also affect the company's objective. Control risk is the external risk, change of legal policy, and legal political situations, geopolitical situations, outbreak of war, outbreak of pandemic. Speculative or sometimes it's a positive, neutral, and negative effect, and usually it's financial, but also non-financial, human welfare and social gains, etc. Outcome is not guaranteed. Okay. but more categories of corporate risk. And for example, investment risk, financial risk, customer default risk, contract risk, liquidity risk, project risk, exchange rate risk, for example, CITIC case, we will come to this, corporate risk, corruption risk, business risk, capital risk, reputation risk, operation risk. Okay, specific categories of corporate risk, principal risk, that is a significant risk and key risk that will affect the success of the company. Emerging risk, that disruptive risk, refer to the risk that does not yet affect the organization but may develop and become principal risk in the future. Therefore, we usually keep a risk profile or risk register to keep the principal risk and the emerging risk that may affect the company. Okay, principal risk is the existing risk, is the current risk, significant risk that will affect the success of the company. Whereas for the emerging risk is the disruptive risk that has not yet occurred but may develop to become the principal risk. Therefore, we usually keep a risk profile or risk register that we keep these principal risk and emerging risk, and then the company has to regularly review the situation of this principal risk and emerging risk, and sometimes we will find out that the principal risk becomes not so significant, and then we can degrade the principal risk because we want to allocate more resources to deal with those principal risks. But sometimes you will also find that the emergence risk has already occurred and becomes the principal risk. Therefore, we need to regulate, we need to update our risk profile or risk register of the company on a regular basis, at least maybe once every year or half a year regularly. Okay, some specific risk concept: tail risk, black swan, hacking, or cliff risk, and the wrong way risk, etc. Case 1. Typical risk for satellite project. When we launch a satellite, usually the launching successful rate is about 90%. That means we need to face the 10% of failure. However, for satellite project, usually it will cost maybe 300 million US dollar or 400 million US dollars, and then the loss of the whole satellite in the event of the launching failure, then we will lose the whole project, and therefore we need to handle. We need to manage the launching failure. Then, okay. In case of a launching failure, we lost 200 million for MO6 satellite. Some example, and then the even worse, the transfer of title of risk of the satellite from a supplier to operator is usually at the point of intentional elision. That means when the launching vehicle is intentionally deleted and then start to lift off, the title transfer to the owner, to the operator, and then at the same time the risk will also transfer. Okay, transfer, and that means it is the point of no return, and the satellite operator becomes the owner as well as accepting the risk. And in case of launching failure, under the 10% failure rate, then you lost the whole satellite project. And how to handle this? The consequence of a satellite launching failure will cause massive damage and fatal consequences relating to parties or even profit. Therefore, we need to cover third parties' liability risk. And then the litigation risk, compliance risk, because we lost the project. We have to cover the government loss and damages, the enterprise, including the launcher and the settler owners. This is the compliance risk and the litigation risk. We need to cover this and by insurance. In the event of launching failure, the total project cost, asset impairment, project risk. That is the so-called project risk. The operator will also lose business opportunity. This is the business risk because we need to face the customers. We have already signed the business contract with the customer, and then we have the existing customer in the existing satellite. If it is a replacement satellite, we launch a new satellite to replace the old one, and then the existing customer, if we fail to launch a new satellite for the replacement, the existing customer will know where to go. Okay, they do not have the satellite, new satellite for replacement, and therefore we lost the business opportunity. Okay, and in case of no satellite, and that is the business risk. And then the business continuity, because the existing customer will have no alternative satellite to jump, and all parties lost reputation. There is a business reputation risk. And sometimes, as we have mentioned, the successful rate is 90%, but we can make use of the two satellite strategy. Two satellite deal, that means we can improve the successful rate from 90% to 99%. Okay, and also we have to cover the satellite by insurance. There are two types of insurance. The first one is the asset insurance to cover the asset loss. In case of launching failure, it is covered by insurance to recap our the $300 million total project cost, and including the insurance premium. Okay, and then we also need to the third party liability insurance to cover the third party liability loss, and including the government of Hong Kong as well as the China government for covering from any risk event affecting any third parties during the launching operation. Another typical example, Zhongheng, is the political risk. That is for illustration of the political risk. And that incident illustrates the compliance risk, political risk, internal control risk, market risk, and then financial risk, and then the corporate sustainability risk. The group has been in coma for a period of time, and then U.S. government accused it in breach of a settlement agreement. It was denied from the U.S. high technology supplies, subject to an additional fine of $1.3 billion. Case 3, foreign currency exchange rate risk. CITIC case, as I mentioned, now known as the CITIC Limited, make unauthorized speculations on the foreign currency market in October 2008, lost approximately $1.9 billion equivalent to 14.8 billion. 148億港元 when accounted for in mark-to-market terms, actually that was accumulator. The loss, lost a lot of money, but the problem is that they failed to disclose it in a timely manner. In the certain circular circular documents disclosed in a subsidiary of the CITIC Group, they failed to disclose in a timely manner, and then still making the statement that the financial situation of the companies remains intact. Okay, and then the stock price plunged 55.1%, and then directors were charged under the Section 277 of the SFO Securities and Future Ordinance Chapter 571 and Market Misconduct Tribunal 市場不當行為審裁處 by the securities futures ordinance. That is the Securities and Futures Commission, 證監會, and subsequently it should be 證監會 Commission. Sorry about that. And then subsequently, Market Misconduct Tribunal found the directors were not culpable of. They just claimed that they are not financial experts. They did not aware of these cumulative loss, substantial loss of the city, and they are not a financial expert. They the consequence of those accumulated, right? The foreign exchange, and they were not found. They were found not culpable. And Section 277 actually is that the listed companies disclosing information incorrectly, or withheld certain informations, and then and as a result, that public investor to influencing the investor to buy or not to buy certain listed company shares, and then that is a certain resulting in misleading information that cause investor to lose money to buy the shares or not to buy the shares. That is Section 277. The processes of risk management, process, establishing the context. The boundary line, the group, the subsidiaries, the border of the management process, the environment, the culture, and then identifying risks. What are the risks? And then analyzing, quantifying the risk, integrating the risk. Quantifying the risk, that is the estimate the risk, the magnitude of the risk. Analyze what kinds of risk, the category of the risk. And then integrating the risk. Some of the risks can come together, grouping together into a big one, or grouping together. And some of the risks can be splitting out into different types of risks, according to their categories. Assessing and prioritize the risk. Those are the high risk items has to come out, and then putting more resources and focus on those high risk items. Treating and exploiting the risk. That means to reduce the risk, for example, by contract, by insurance, by club deal, like for example, monitoring and reviewing the risk. Monitoring, to regulate, to regularly review and assess the risk, and with a risk register and profile, and at least once every year or half yearly, and then to review whether this significant risk or the principal risk or the emerging risk has already changed, or continue to be as they are. And then communicating. That means to communicate with the concerned departments or the people, and upkeeping or the board of directors, to report to them, to upkeep, to keeping up the update. Internal control and risk management is also very important. Internal control itself help manage risk. They work hand in hand together, and then risk management. Internal control is a very important part of the risk management. But internal control itself it includes the risk assessment component, and we will come to this. All companies have inherent risks, and they should manage and control the risk by the effective internal control system. Okay, therefore, for inherent risk, when they set up the internal control and as well as risk management, they can help to reduce the internal control risk, inherent risk. And then therefore, leaving behind is the residual risk. We cannot totally remove all the risk, but we can reduce the risk. Okay, and therefore, when the auditor come, they will review the internal control system of the company, and if they find that the internal control system fail or not an effective one, they will consider the residual risk will be very high, and that means the audit risk will be very high, and they will charge you very high audit fees, or refuse to conduct to act as the conductor auditor of the company. Okay, and therefore for the internal control as well as the risk management is the risk-based approach. Because we will allocate resource to those high-risk items. Risk assessment is the process of identification and analysis of the risk, and evaluate of the risk, and compare the risk item as against the risk, the principal risk as well as the emergent risk as recorded in the risk profile or the risk register. It forms a basis for determining how risk should be managed. Risk assessment is one of the 5 key components of the internal control system. This is the COSO system, the 2013 version. Therefore, risk assessment is one of the important components of this COSO system, the internal control system. The first component part is the control environment. The second one is the risk assessment. The third one is the control activities. And then the fourth one is information and communications. And the fifth one is monitoring activities. That is the relationship between the internal control system and the risk management. Certain pitfalls for risk management, box ticking effect. Box ticking, the risk management. Some of the directors may consider, okay, risk management is the window dressing. They just box ticking attitude, and then failures to prioritize the key risks. The problem too narrow to focus on the financial. Too narrow. They focus on the financial risk. They just focus on the financial instead of the reputation or business risk. For example, the bank, they just focus on the Basel standard. Not enough attention paid to changes in the internal or external environment. Therefore, listing rules requires the review of the risk on a regular basis, such as once every year, at least once every year, or even half a yearly. Board discussion risk, but not integrating it into their own decision making. Not integrated in the strategies. Failure to embed the risk management in the organization culture. Okay. Risk management challenges. The problem for risk management is that risk model have become increasingly complex. Geopolitical system, pandemic, and the balancing multiple outputs from different risk model. Interconnected. Risks are interconnected. The risk event may have effect on other risk event, and therefore it's difficult to categorize the risk. And then difficult to manage. In the financial service industry, number of required regulatory risk model have grown exponentially. Okay. Link between the risk model assumption and long-term strategic objective needs to be stronger. It's difficult to link risk management with strategy of the company. Responsibility and problem. Candidates are required to make themselves familiar with this. This is the Corporate Governance Codes and Corporate Governance Report, Appendix 14 of the listing rules. D2, Section D2. That is the the listing rule, the relevant listing rules regarding the risk management and internal control. Therefore, the candidates make themselves familiar with this before for the examination. They have to be keep themselves aware of this. The board should be evaluating and determining the nature, extent of risk, and establishing, maintain appropriate, effective risk management and internal control, and then should provide the confirmation to the board. Management should provide the confirmation to the board. That is, the board oversees the risk management. The board or the board committee oversees the risk management, internal control, and ensure the management team to provide to do the work and then provide the confirmation to the board that the risk management system and internal control system remain effective for the financial period, for the relevant financial period. The D21, this is the key point. Very important point. The board should oversee the issuer's risk management internal control system on an ongoing basis to ensure that a review of the effectiveness of the issuers and its subsidiaries risk management and internal control system have been conducted at least annually and reports to shareholders. That means and report it has done so in its corporate governance report. In the annual report, they have to disclose that they have reviewed the risk management and internal control system on an ongoing basis, and then the remain effective. The internal control system and risk management remain effective, and they have to do this to conduct a review and evaluation at least once every year, and report to the shareholders in the corporate governance report. The review should cover, the second bullet point, the review should cover all material controls, including financial, operational, and compliance. 3 areas: financial, whether the financial reports are reliable, whether and then audited, unqualified opinion, and also the operational risk, operational internal control situation in system, and the compliance control, operational control and compliance control, whether the risk management and internal control system for these 3 areas remain effective. Okay, and then the annual review should particularly ensure the adequacy of the resources, whether they have put into enough resources. D22, okay, staff qualifications, whether the staff are qualified and experienced, training program, and budget of the issuer's accounting, internal audit, etc. D23, and the review should also cover the key points, the changes in the nature and extent, significant risk. Remember the principal risk and the emergent risk for the as recorded in the risk register. The scope of the quality of the management's ongoing monitoring risk, the extent and frequency of the communications and monitoring result, the significant control failures, any control failures, any risk management failure has to be reported and disclosed. Of course, the effectiveness of the issuer's process has to be confirmed by the management team. And then D24, how they have complied with the risk management internal control system. D25, internal audit function. D26, the listed company has established the whistleblowing policy. Whistleblowing policy is also very important for risk management system and internal control system, and therefore they work together, and it helps to manage risk and reduce corruption risk and internal control risk, as well as compliance risk. And the issue, therefore, it becomes a code provision. In the past, it is just a recommended basis, but now it is the code provision. and listed company has to set up the whistleblowing policy, and so that the employees or the concerned parties can disclose, can raise their concern to the appropriate person or external regulators without the concerns of being retaliated by. They are protected from being retaliation by the accused. The issuer should establish policy and system that promote and support anti-corruption laws and regulations. Audit committee has a very strong role in the risk management and internal control system. One of the important terms of reference for audit committee is the oversight of the issuer's financial reporting system, risk management, internal control system. Audit committee to review financial control, internal control, and risk management. And then for Companies Ordinance Chapter 622 is the new one. The director's report for a financial year must contain a business review that consists of a description of the principal risks and uncertainties facing the companies. Director's duties is the director has the duty to deal with those risk management and internal control because they have the duty of skill, care, and diligence to cope with the risk and conduct risk management of the company. Roles and duties of company secretary and the compliance executives. And then, of course, the additional role and duties of company secretary, they need to liaise external professional support, investor relationship, and the crisis management, disclose in a corporate governance report, and liaise with regulators. Okay, here's a summary. This is the end of the part 1, and we will start the. In addition to ISO 31000, there are also other national standards and guidelines to help the risk management. Typical example, Australian standard, New Zealand standard, they have also their own set of ISO 31000 issued in 2009. And then ISO 31004 risk management. Um, 31004 and also 37301 in 2021. That is ISO specifically for specifically for compliance management system with the requirements with guidance for use. And then internal control integrated framework for COSO 2017, and then the risk management and corporate governance for OECD 2014. But later on, they have another later version. Guidance on the risk management, internal control, and risk and related financial and business reporting. There are certain source of guidance and standards. Additional one, okay, for your reference. In the study material, it also talk about the Orange Book. It is also actually is required by the syllabus, mainly for the government office. Okay. Green books. Okay. And then risk management as a foundation of organizational success. Evaluation of risk management that is required by the syllabus. But it is unlikely they will come out in the examination. And risk management actually is a combined consolidated subject with reference to or based on the other subjects. For example, internal standard of risk, corporate governance and compliance, accounting and internal control, corporate social responsibility and sustainability, banking and financial and actuarial risk, probability statistics and the game theory, insurance and the insurance law, commercial law and business law and contract law, etc. Linking risk to strategy. Okay, this is also one of the hot topic. Roles and risk management in entities. Section 3 of Chapter 6 of study material. Manage and reduce uncertainty encountered by the entities. Example, project risk management. Okay. Avoid the occurrence of the risk event. Control the impact or in case of occurrence of risk event. Help prepare for worst scenarios such as the crisis management. Risk management can help to manage and reduce uncertainty encountered by or reduce the risk encountered by the entities. Increase the range of opportunities. Example, market competition in banking industry, banking field or insurance company. Identify the new opportunity and new challenge. Therefore, the bank or the insurance, they will work together with the risk events, and so that they can increase and improve their market competition. And then anticipation and resilience. Example, operation risk. How to respond to the risk event in case of the occurrence of risk or the failure of control. They have the crisis management. They anticipate the occurrence of the risk, prepare for the crisis management as well as the business continuity to deal with the operation risk. And periodic review of the risk factor, internal and external risk factor, and stakeholders communications. Always make contact with the suppliers as well as the customer in case of an emergency, in case of a crisis. What they expect the response to the supplier, what they expect the suppliers to do, as well as the customers to cooperate and understand. Well anticipate and well prepare the occurrence of the beforehand. Example, Enron case. Well allocate the scarce resources, especially the management time, reduce the performance variability. Okay. Supporting internal control. Supporting internal control and then high standard of corporate governance. Sarbanes-Oxley Act in 2002. Sarbanes-Oxley Act is because of the Enron case, the U.S. government enacted the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and tightened the internal control as well as the monitoring of those auditing firms under PCAOB. Risk management works with internal control and the compliance management for corporate governance as well as the whistleblowing. Improve resources deployment and project success, and then create value in formulating appropriate strategy. Example, risk tolerance level. For long-term development and sustainability, strategic risk taking and adverse risk taking. Opportunity risk and risk appetite. And as you have well aware that the risk can be categorized for compliance risk, for asset risk, and then control risk as well as opportunity risk, speculating risk. Okay, risk can be desirable and deliver benefits or rewards, opportunity risk or project risk or speculating risk. To launch a new product by a business or project risk, see the opportunity from the successful marketing and or that product. To launch a new product by business risk or project risk. Okay, a project risk is even more challenging in the digital age because the product life cycle is generally very short. Risk level in product life cycle. For illustration, rewards at the vertical axis is the potential reward, the benefit from the project, and then the level of risk is the project risk. Okay, at the very beginning, when we start up the operation, the level of risk will be very high, but the benefit will be very low. And then come to the fast-growing phases, the level of risk will be very high, but the potential reward will be growing very fast. And later on, when the mature operations, the level of risk will be low. You come to low level, with the benefit will be very high. When the product life decline, the level of risk will be very low because it's at the end of the project life cycle, but the benefit will be low again. Here it illustrates the product life cycle, the level of risk, and then the potential benefit. It is also illustrating the capital investment. When we make the capital investment, it will be put in the resources, the risk level will be very high. That means when we put in the resources, it should be justified, because it will involve risk level. We need to consider for the risk level at the various stage of the product life cycle. Okay, it is also illustration. And risk versus rewards in strategy. And the company has to consider the business growth. When we consider business growth, we need to consider the project risk, and therefore we need to take into account what is the risk appetite of the company. That means that to what extent that we can accept the risk level, the risk magnitude, and then to what extent that we can tolerate, go beyond which the company cannot sustain. That is the so-called the risk appetite. Whether we are willing to accept risk or we are averse to accept risk, and then what is our tolerance? To what extent that we can tolerate the risk level, and then what is our risk capacity? That's to what extent that the company can work with the risk, the capacity of the entity to face the risk. Foundation, linking the risk to strategy. That means we need to the companies has to take into account the risk when they set up the strategy. And that means that they have to make reference to and then link the risk to strategy. When we take into account the strategy, then that means we need to consider the risk. What is the risk appetite of the company? What is the risk level that we can tolerate, and what is the risk capacity? To what extent that we can that means that we have to come up with a very effective risk management in order to maintain to update the strategy of the company. Therefore, the entity needs to strengthen the strategic risk framework so as to better connect different decision-making steps, including the initiation of a strategic review, to assessment of alternative strategies, including their overall fitness, the execution of a strategy, and monitoring and manage risks that arise from chosen strategies. Okay, and then certain terms with with the formulation of the corporate strategies. What is the risk appetite of the company? What is the risk tolerance? Appetite, whether the company is willing to accept risk, to what extent that we are willing to accept the risk, to take the risk, whether the company should averse to the risk. And then what is the risk tolerance? That is to what extent that we can tolerate the risk. And then the risk capacity. What is the highest level that the company can accept the risk? What is our capacity? Whether we have the risk, the crisis management capability, or the business continuity. Okay, what is the risk attitude? What is the culture of the company? Whether the company is risk aware culture, and then where is the culture? Where is the culture? Is the company's culture favorable to the internal control? Where is the company's employees is prepared themselves for taking the risk or faced with the risk? And then whether the company is risk taking or are willing to take the risk, or risk adversary, refuse to take the risk. The role of the company, of course, the board of the directors has prepared themselves to understand the risk, and also setting up the specific team, the professional to deal with the risk. To at least the chief executive, as well as the one of the vice president must be leaders of the risk management team. Okay, and also they have to recruit the professionals, and setting up subcommittees to deal with the risk. Subcommittees, for example, the audit committee, or as well as the risk management committee, and the compliance management. Okay, the professionals, for example, the compliance executive or the corporate governance executives, and the compliance manager, and the company secretary, the corporate professionals, the internal auditors, the officers, etc. Okay, and then the duties of the directors under the listing rules. For example, as we have dealt with the Appendix 14, we have discussed the Appendix 14, the D2, that the board of directors is required to review the principal risk as well as the emerging risk, as recorded in the risk profile, to review and evaluate the risk, the principal risk, on a regular basis, at least once every year or half yearly, and then then the risk review items, including the financial reportings, the operation control, as well as the compliance control. Okay, and then they have to ensure they have the enough resources to review the external risk as well as the internal risk items. And then they ensure the management team to report to the board of directors that the risk management and the internal control system remain effective over the financial period. And according to corporate governance codes, 2.4 has to be reported in and fully disclosed in the corporate governance report. And then 2.5, D2.5 is that they have the internal audit function. 2.6 is the whistleblowing policy for the protection of the whistleblowers, and then 2.7 is the setting up of the ABAC, that is anti-corruption law. Many organizations have risk appetite frameworks statements. In order to link strategies with the risk with the strategies, the company has to determine the risk appetite, the risk tolerance, the risk capacity, and because they have to take into account when they setting up the strategies, that to an extent that they can deal with the risk risky project, because the new projects are risky. Okay, and therefore they have to take into account whether they are willing to take the risk or averse to the risk, and also to what extent they can accept the risk, and then how to control the risk in dealing with the new projects. For example, they need to justify they have to review the political environment and the social environment, economical situation of the market, and also technology level, and also environmental issue, as well as the legal issue. Risk appetite, the definition. There are many definitions. Is the level of risk exposure that organization is prepared to accept. It is also well defined in the BS standard. We will come to this later. Another definition is the willingness to take a defined level of risk in the pursuit of its strategic objectives. This is the risk appetite. Various factors have influenced the level of risk appetite chosen by an organization. The legal and environmental requirement, the risk preference for key stakeholders groups such as suppliers, the stakeholders, of course, have the effect on the risk appetite. The special knowledge, skill, and experience of the organization in risk compliance and government specialists, the directors, of course, the strength of an organization balance sheet. If the balance sheet is very high sounding, is very strong, then of course they can have a very high profile risk appetite and tolerance. External factors such as technology change and economic growth. Risk tolerance. The term risk tolerance may be used instead of risk appetite, especially where the focus is on the downside risk. When it is in a typical situations, that of course the companies will consider the risk tolerance, to what extent they can tolerate the risk. Okay, if it is considering a new investment, at the new strategy, of course, they will take the term risk appetites, and sometimes they can be used interchangeably. Tolerance limits is the best understood of the best understood in the context of the downside risk. To what extent they can tolerate the risk. This is comparing the risk appetite and the risk tolerance. Risk capacity, the maximum enterprise-wide level of risk to which an organization may be exposed. The maximum amount is usually a function of the organization's financial strength. In terms of a corporate strategy of a company, risk management can create value and can be opportunities. Example, bank and insurance. Risk can have a positive effect, example, investment in the stock market. Risk management should be included in formulating corporate strategy of a company so that the directors can have a more forward understanding of the risk and opportunity. And scenario analysis ultimately can come up with well-considered, informed decision. Okay. And independent and up-to-standard risk management can help ensure the comprehensive review of most of the essential part of including financial, technical, business, regulatory, and stakeholders. Then when they take into account, when they consider corporate strategies, they have to take into account various factors. Okay, that is important of risk management in formulating corporate strategy. That will help the companies to control the risk when considering or formulating the corporate strategies. It can help them to when they formulate the corporate strategies, they can take into account the risk management procedures. For example, the directors has to take into account the political issue, the social issue, the economic issue, and then technical problem, and also environmental problem, legal factors. Okay, the regulatory issue, and to just so that they can going through the risk management framework in formulating the corporate strategies, it can help to reduce the risk, especially the new project risk. And therefore, it's better to to incorporate the risk management in the corporate strategies. And also, the company's management, the risk management should be when they set up the company structure, and they have to take into account the risk management to ensure that the risk management can embed it into the management system at all levels and entity-wide. All parts of the company should incorporate the risk management instead of going in parallel. Okay. And then the company should come up with the risk appetite statement for risk tolerance level. That is, to the extent that the companies will willing to accept the risk level, to what extent, under what situation, and in what financials. Okay. Okay, that is the end of the part 2. Okay, this is the part 3 of section 1B. Risk management process, perspectives, and responsibility. Risk management process. You can refer to section 2.1, chapter 7 of the study material. And the standard components of a risk management process should include identification of risk, assessment of risk, control and, and treatment or reduction of risk, and then monitoring and review of risk. There are 4 key components. The first one is the identification of risk, identifying the risk, to find out the risk, and then assess the exposure, assess of risk. That means to categorize the risk, and then analyze the risk, evaluate the risk, and compare it with the register, the risk register and risk profile. And of course, for identifying the risk, including the establishing the context, and then determines the boundary. To what extent we review the risk, what the subsidiaries of the group, the group borderline, and then assess the risk means to analyze, categorize, analyze, and evaluate the risk and compare it with the benchmark, compare it with the risk, with the principal risk and the principal risk, and as well as the emerging risk. And then we need to control the risk. Actually, we come to the control, to reduce the risk, to treat the risk, and then finally monitor risk. After the treatment, whether the risk has been dealt with, and then whether we need to live with, and then we need to monitor the risk on a regular basis as required under the Appendix 14 D2, that we need to review and evaluate the risk on a regular basis, at least once every year. Okay, for the financial control, operational control, and compliance control. And the management team has to be make confirmation that in respect of the effectiveness of the risk management and as well as internal control. Okay. You come to enterprise risk management framework. How the risk management from an enterprise-wide basis. Defining enterprise risk management from according to the causal system, internal control, the culture, the capabilities, and practice that organization integrate with strategy setting and apply with when they carry out that strategy with the purpose of managing risk in creating, preserving, realizing the value. That is from a causal system. The Orange Book, coordinated activity design and operate to manage risk and exercise internal control within an organization. RIMS, enterprise management, is a strategic business discipline that supports the approach of enterprise risk management. Broader approach including unifying, holistic view, integrated, strategic, and enterprise-wide. Unifying, that means that all the resources and efforts come together. Holistic, that means it's a comprehensive one. And then integrated, of course, the enterprise risk management has to integrate well with the existing management system. It has to be integrated instead of separate into separate system running. And then strategic, it has a high level. When we setting up the company, because it directly affects the objective of the company. It has to be determined when formulating the strategies. It has to be taken into account the risk management enterprise. And then is the enterprise-wide, the whole company, instead of a part of the company. Okay? And then the concern with the opportunities and threats that can impact the objectives. We take into account the opportunities with the risk management. We consider it is opportunities. It will come up with a positive effect. And then the key dependence on the core process of the entities. Address the fact interrelated in the connectivity and internal and external risk. Features, what are the features of the enterprise risk management approaches? Important issue, encompass all areas of organization exposure to risk. Typical example, the risk, financial, operational, compliance, governance, strategy, reputational, etc. All areas of organization. As in the features, is enterprise-wide, integrated. The key points are integrated and enterprise-wide. Priorities and management, those exposure as an interrelated risk portfolio rather than individual zero of risk. Okay, we need to prioritize and manage those exposure, high risk item, and the interrelated risk portfolio. That means that we have to take into account those risk items, they are interrelated. That means that we need to classify them, categorize them, analyze them, grouping together or splitting it up into. We need to evaluate the risk. That is the work of, that is the area of the risk assessment. Okay. Evaluate the risk portfolio in the context of all significant internal and external context, system, circumstances, and stakeholders. And then recognize the individual risks across the organizations are interrelated and can create a combined exposures. And the structural process of the management of all risks, whether those risks are primarily quantitative or quantitative in nature. And seek to embed risk management as a component in all critical decisions throughout the organization, enterprise-wide, okay, and well integrated it. Provide a means for organization to identify the risk that it is willing to take in order to achieve strategic objective. construct a means of communicating on risk issue, and support the activities for internal audit, internal control by providing a structure of provision of assurance. And then effective management of risk as a competitive advantage. That is, risk management can be considered as a positive, as a competitive advantage. If we have a very effective risk management, it can help us to compete in the market. Benefits of enterprise risk management involve the identification and evaluation of uncertainties. It can help us to identify the risk and evaluate the risk that affects the objective of organization. Involve processes to implement and monitor actions to manage the uncertainties. It can help to manage uncertainties, of course, and then a form of risk appetite. Formulate a form of risk appetite. Because of the risk management, when we formulate the strategies, we need to take into account the risk, and therefore we need to determine the risk appetite or the risk tolerance to what extent, and then we, in terms of risk capacity, in terms of financials, and then produce information to help management improve business decision. After formulating of the strategies, of course, at that time we need to take into account the risk management, and then for the operation of the company, from time to time we have to risk register, and then we have the effective risk management framework or the risk management system, and then we have to operate the risk management from time to time on a regular basis. And then for a significant decision making, we have to go through the risk management. That means that we have to review the political issue, the social issue, they go through the political, the social, technological, and then environmental, and then social, economical, and then the legal, all the feasibility study, okay, and produce information to help management to improve the business decision. Because we have taken into account all these risk factors, and we can come up with a better informed decision, improve the efficiency and delivery of services, and it can help allocation of resources because it is a risk-based approach, and it can help us to deal with those high-risk items, and therefore it can improve the allocations of resources. It can create shareholders' value. For example, it can improve. It can maintain the value of the company, and it can improve the value of the company, shareholders' value, enhance risk reporting to stakeholders. Continued benefits of enterprise risk management. The analysis can be in the form of a firm risk scorecard. Firm includes the financial, infrastructure, reputational, and marketplace. And then it comes to benefits. For example, for financial, it can reduce costs, increase probability, improve risk reporting, enhance corporate governance. For infrastructure, efficiency, improved competitive advantages, resilient, improved supply, staff morale, and risk culture. And reputational, improve the company image and publicity, enhance the shareholders' value, improve perception of entity. Marketplace, commercial opportunities maximize. Better marketplace presence, increased customer satisfactory, lower market risk, and proper risk. Okay, this in terms of this is some sort of analysis scorecard based on the firm FIRM for representing financial, infrastructure, reputational, and marketplace. This is also extracted from so-called causal system, enterprise risk management. You can get it from a causal, and it illustrates the framework itself. Is set of principles organized in the 5 interrelated components. What are the interrelated components? Including the mission, vision, strategic development, business objective formulation, implementing, and performance, and enhanced value. Okay, they are interrelated. And then interrelated components, governance and culture, strategy and objective setting, and performance. Review and revision, and informations and communications and reporting. Okay. The first component is governance and culture. Governance sets the cornerstone of enterprise risk management, support enterprise to achieve its objective. Culture pertains to ethical value, design, behavior, and understanding of risk in the entity. Strategy and objectives, setting and the performance. Review and revision, information and communications and reporting. Apart from ISO, they also the syllabus also cover the enterprise risk management system in the form of COSO. Okay, that means you need to make yourself familiar with COSO system. But unless in the examination you are requested to answer the question in a COSO system or ISO 31000. Of course, if it is specifically specified, you need to follow in examination. Then if it is you are required to ISO 31000, then you need to answer the question in the form of ISO 31000. But if the question required you to answer the question in COSO system, then you need to follow the requirement. Okay, but I will be quite doubtful whether they will so specific that require you to answer the questions in the ISO or answer the questions in the COSO. Okay. 20 key principles with each of the 5 components. 20 key principles. And then, of course, these principles will help the companies to improve the internal control system as well as the risk management system in 5 interrelated components and 20 key principles. Okay, you are encouraged to make yourself familiar with this COSO system. And then role, function, and responsibility for risk management. I think we have already covered the D2 and D3 of Appendix 14 in the earlier PowerPoints. That means it has covered the role and duty of the board of directors, and then the role and duties of management team. Okay. As I mentioned this repeatedly, that the board of directors under the D2, D1 and D2, D21 and D22, that the board of directors has a duty under the corporate the corporate governance code of D2.1 and D2.2 that they have to review the risk management system, the effectiveness of the risk management system and internal control system on a regular basis, at least once every year. Okay. And then the area should be to review the risk the financial, the operational control, as well as the compliance control. And then requires the management team to report to the to confirm the effectiveness of the risk management system and internal control system to the board of directors. Okay, but the board of directors has to ensure that the resources is enough, especially the putting into the risk management system as well as the internal control system with sufficient staffing. And then they also need to review the risk and ensure the risk management system review that conducted on a yearly basis has to cover the external risk as well as the internal risk. And then for the D2 and for the D2.4, D2.5, D2.6, and D2.7. Okay, these are the items they have to cover. And then the D3 is for the audit committee. Audit committee has to handle the financial report reliability as well as the risk management system and internal control system. Okay, that is the responsibility for the audit committee. And then the role and duty of the management team is to perform the review of the risk management system, conduct the review, perform the review, to implement the internal control system, and then they have to confirm to the board of directors, submit the report, and confirm the effectiveness of the risk management system and internal control system. And the function, of audit committee and independent directors. The function of audit committee is under the D3, okay, under the D3, and then the independent directors is chapter 3.10, and then the independent directors, the characteristic of the independent directors 3.11, chapter 3 to 11, okay, of the listing rules. Okay, the independent directors has the appropriate characteristic, and then independent enough, integrity characteristic, appropriate characteristic, and integrity, and as well as independent. And then the function of the risk committee. The risk committee can be under audit committee or a separate risk committee. Okay, the risk committee will oversight the operation of the effectiveness of the risk management system, as well as the independent as well as the internal control system. And then the role and duty of the company secretary and the risk executive, okay, to ensure the functioning, of the audit committee as well as the risk committee, and then ensure the board of directors, the role, the implementation of of the role and duty of the board of directors, and the management team to provide the necessary support, such as the training, such as the liaison with the training of the directors, as well as the training of the employees, and ensure that the risk management is implemented and the enterprise-wide and a well-integrated system. Okay, and also the company secretary has to, as a liaison officer with the regulators, the listed division, as well as the SFC, and also the the liaison of these risk management topics with the stakeholders. Okay, the role and duty of internal audit and external audit. Of course, for the external audit is under D3 because the relationship of the companies and the external auditors is under the oversight area of the audit committee. Therefore, is a section D3 of the Appendix 14. And also for the internal audit is under D25, section D25 of Appendix 14. That's the company has to set up internal audit function. And also the performance of internal auditors is also covered by D3, section D3 of Appendix 14. The board of directors and executive management refer to D2 of Appendix 14. Okay. The board, therefore, is responsible for evaluating and determining the nature and extent of the risk it is willing to take in achieving the issuer's strategic objectives and ensuring that the issuer establishes and maintains appropriate and effective risk management and internal control system. The board of directors and executive management continue. The board should oversee. Okay, I think we have covered the D21 and D22. D23, D24, and the audit committee. D3, D33, audit committee's role and responsibility. Okay, risk committee. A risk committee can be under audit committee because an audit committee can cover risk management and internal control system. However, it can be a separate committee. Therefore, it's up to the listed company to set up another committee for the risk management. If it is under a separate committee, that means it's a specific committee to handle the risk management. Okay, and then it can be a standalone risk management, and organization size and structural capacities are factors in this decision. Okay, it depends. For a lot of listed companies come up with a combined risk and audit committee, but some of the company come up with a standalone risk management risk committee. Okay, and of course the company has to ensure that either way, no matter the formation of this risk committee, that the listed companies has to ensure that the risk committee have enough resources and appropriate staffing instead of just without any resources. Without resources and staffing, it cannot operate. Okay. And then, of course, if it is come up with a standalone, then it is vested with the terms of reference, appropriate terms of reference to handle the risk management, maintain and operate the risk management, management framework. Okay, and the key point is to ensure the risk management, ensure that the companies has maintained the effective risk management framework, and then the risk management system has to be well integrated with the existing management system, and also it is the risk management is the enterprise wide without any dead corner, and also it has to be reduced. The company has come up with a risk culture, risk-aware culture, and then with sufficient resources to implement. And then every party, including the operational staff, understand, are well aware of their own role and duty for risk management. Other specific specific staff, for example, the chief risk officer, they have the role and duties, and then the risk manager and risk function under the chief risk officer, CRO. There is the RM, and compliance manager or the compliance function. More specific resources and staffing for compliance management, and then internal audit and risk management. Internal audit and risk management, D25. And then the company secretary and governance professionals. And then roles and responsibility for risk management are the stakeholders in enterprises, finance, human resources, customers, suppliers, shareholders. They are also roles and responsibility for risk management. For example, whistleblowing for customers or the suppliers, and then shareholders. Okay. This is the end of part 3, and then we go on to part 4. GRC concept. GRC is a combination of a governance concept, risk management as a compliance, and this will help. This will help the combined effect, and because these topics are interrelated. Of course, I think we'll cover the risk management and compliance risk management. Compliance risk is an important component of risk, and also risk management is a important component of the corporate governance, and therefore the GRC reporting or GRC concept actually is merging the 3 important areas into one, and so that they can, or the informations can interrelated and come up with interrelated and with a combined effect, more effective combined effect. Aim to synchronize information and activities across governance, risk, and compliance in order to operate more efficiently, enable effective information sharing. Okay, and it is also helpful to enterprise risk management and corporate compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Okay, with the coordinated efforts. Okay. Compliance management. One of the categories of risk is compliance risk. For example, stock categories: strategic risk, technical risk, operational risk, and compliance risk. And compliance risk is a basic type of risk. For example, compliance risk, hazard risk, control risk, and opportunity risk. Okay, compliance risk is one of the key types of risk. and also therefore for the risk management, we need to handle the compliance risk, and compliance risk may be from internal or external source of risk, and it may result in serious consequence in financial situations and reputation. Therefore, it is a big problem. Bow-tie analysis model, source, strategic, stock, STOC, right? Compliance risk, and then it can come up with a very serious consequence of impact in financial, infrastructure, reputational, and marketplace. I think we have covered this for firm, FIRM, in short. And external risk, source of risk, external risk, and then internal risk for compliance management. Externally, for example, change of rules and regulations, change of technology, change of license, and then internal risk, change of management team, change of directors, change of change of the internal auditors, change of independent directors. Okay. Characteristic of compliance risk, usually associated with law and rules and regulations, and unavoidable. We cannot avoid it. We have to. Our operations relies on the license. Therefore, we cannot avoid the compliance risk. And then external and internal source of risk. We have covered this, and then captures legal and financial penalties for failing to act or acting inappropriately. Legal and financial consequences, because it's a failure to conform to the license is sometimes is a legal issue. And then failure for those regulated business or license with specific terms, telecom, broadcasting. Okay, serious consequence for failure. Example, mandatory winding up of a company. For example, China Metal Recycling, a listed company, by section 202 of the chapter 5.571 of Securities and Future Ordinance. The winding up of the company of the China Metal Recycling. Okay, delisting of the listed companies. Okay, because failure of the conform to or comply with the listing rules. Okay, this is a serious consequence, and the worst situation is the delisting. Directors may be put in jail. For example, insider dealing. Okay. Judicial effect on ongoing and sustainability, of course. If the company fail to comply with their obligations, and then company reputation may heavily tarnished by any scandal, because fail to comply with rules and regulations is a serious scandal. Difficulties on managing compliance risks. Compliance risks are virtually unavoidable without proper risk management. It is difficult to bypass. It is company's obligations under the law. Okay, a typical example: disclosure obligations of listed companies, and also difficult to be transferred to another party. We cannot transfer, but it's under license. For example, under license, directors' duties are specific to directors, and the duties are generally not allowed to be transferred or absorbed by delegation. For example, directorship. It is a compliance, but the directors cannot delegate the authority to another person, because directors' duty is individual. And then cannot be avoided, cannot be transferred. Difficult to prevent from occurring. Compliance and internal control loopholes under poor risk-aware culture or environment. It is difficult to prevent from occurring. because, for example, the filing of annual return under the company ordinance, it cannot bypass, it cannot prevent from occurring. Difficult to fully cover the risk by insurance. Under the insurance, it cannot be fully covered. It can cover a bit, for example, D&O, but it cannot absolutely fully cover. How to managing compliance risk? The reason that we need to manage it because we want to control the risk. Even though we cannot totally remove the risk or control the risk, we can mitigate the risk. In case of failure to control, we can manage to mitigate the loss and damages. And also under the law, for example, the part 14A, okay, if the companies in case of a failure to disclose the inside information in a timely manner, in case the company has a very effective risk management system for the disclosure of inside information, and even though it failed to control the risk, that there's a failure for the disclosure of inside information, but the companies can also mitigate their damages by the reason that they have effective risk management control system, okay, in order to mitigate their liability and the penalty. Regulators, court, MMT will look into the case details before making this decision or judgment. Positive efforts of the company or directors may help mitigate the liabilities. Typical example is the independent directors for Greencool case in Market Misconduct Tribunal. Okay, the Market Misconduct Tribunal pardoned the independent non-executive directors, claiming that they have already done their best efforts to try to avoid the occurring of these failures. They have already done they have conducted their efforts. They have done their parts already. This is a typical example for mitigating the compliance risk. Therefore, it is critically important for listed companies to operate and maintain comprehensive, high standard compliance management system. The compliance management system can support the risk management, to support the implementation of risk management, to prevent compliance risk from happening, to mitigate damages when compliance failure occur, to reinforce an inductive environment and compliance and risk-aware culture, to project a good company reputation and image for CSR and sustainability, to the adoption of implementation of compliance risk management can help mitigate the penalty. Example, example part 14A of Chapter 571, to support internal control system for whistleblowing. Introduction for compliance management system, ISO 37301. This is the extracted from the standard plan, do, check, and act. Key definition, okay. I think more detail will be covered in a later PowerPoint. I think we can skip at this point. 3 lines of defense. Sometimes it comes out in examination paper. It is part of the risk management. The 3 lines of defense. First line of defense is by internal control measure, management control, and then the second line is the management, risk management, quality inspection, compliance. And then the third line is the internal audit, is the last line of the defense. Okay. That is first line is the operational, internal control measure and the management control and the operational. The second line is the financial control, security, risk management, quality, and the third line is the internal audit. Okay. There is also the so-called 5 lines assurance. The 5 line assurance consists of board of directors, internal audit, special unit, CEO, and work units. The board has the overall responsibility for assuring there are effective risk management in place of other 4 pillars. Are effectively managed risk within the organization's risk appetites and tolerance. Anyhow, the board has the ultimate responsibility, okay, and duty. This is the so-called 5 lines of assurance. Roles and responsibility for compliance management. Each party has the responsibility, their own responsibility and duty. For example, board of directors, of course, the ultimate is the board of directors, and then the top management, then the audit committee, subcommittee. In case a audit committee has a audit committee is a standalone, and then the risk management is another standalone committee. Usually the committee include the risk management, and then company secretary, governance executive, compliance executive, compliance manager, and compliance officer, and then the risk executive, risk manager, and risk officer, internal audit, human resources, line function managers, and operation. Because each party has each member in the entities or in the enterprise has the duty to comply with. It is not the compliance officer or the compliance manager to have the compliance obligations. Actually, each member in the company or the enterprise has a duty to comply with the rules and regulations, the relevant internal rules, no matter it is the internal or external rules and regulations. They have, as long as it is a rules and regulations, they have to comply with it. Therefore, it is the operation team to conform to the rules and regulations, and then is the management to ensure that the line manager to comply with the rules and regulations, and then finally is the internal audit to ensure the management framework, the compliance management framework is, and as well as the risk management framework operating properly, and then ultimately is the top management to review and confirm to the board of directors. And then finally is the board of directors to oversee the whole compliance management system. Okay, this is the end for part 4. As I mentioned, it will be further discussed in the workshop section 2A in a later section. This is we take some time to go through the past examination paper, and for this time we go through the past examination paper in November 2023. Okay, the time allowed is 15 minutes for reading time, but before the examinations, a pre-release case will be circulated to all the candidates, and then the examination time is 3 hours. Okay, and you need to go through 4 questions. The first 3 questions is section A, and then the last question is section B. Section A question, the 3 questions in section A will be based on the pre-release case study. That is, it must be relating to the case. And then the last question is standalone. You can select one from out of 2. Okay, and therefore a total you need to attempt 4 questions, and each question carry 25 marks. Therefore, And therefore, it is a total 4 questions, and then come up with 100 marks in maximum. For first 3 questions, three questions is you can select 3 out of 4, and then that is for section A, and then section B is you can select 1 out of 2. For the pre-release case, I don't think you have time to go through this case. You can make reference to this past paper. This the past paper for November 2023. Okay, this is for construction industry, but the industry is actually is not the key factor. The key factor is okay. First question. Considering the recent issue faced by BPL and the finding of the head of risk management, the board is keen to understand more about the compliance management and compliance risk. Okay, that means this question is about compliance, right? That is compliance. Very clear. Compliance management and compliance risk. Compliance management and compliance management and compliance risk are hot topic. Hot topic. It always come out, and it's very likely to come out. And therefore, risk management system, and then compliance management is a hot topic. If you study compliance well, then you can handle at least 1 question. Okay. And then the second paragraph, prepare a paper for the upcoming board meeting. Assessing compliance management is linked to risk management and compliance risk to ensure any key individual and teams understand their responsibility, including the assessment, roles, and compliance function, the risk management function, and the board of audit committee regarding the compliance management. 25 marks. We come to this. Therefore, second paragraph is the key point for the question. Prepare a paper for the upcoming board meeting. That means you are required to answer the question in the form of a report. Okay. If you come up with a report format, you will be allocated 1 mark. 1 mark. And then throughout the whole paper, there may be 2 to 3 questions. Usually, 2 to 3 questions require the candidates answering the paper in the form of report. If you come up with a report, then you can get 1 mark. If you answer 3 questions with a report format, then you can get 3 marks. You know, 2 to 3 marks are very important to pass and fail. Okay, 1 mark or 2 marks are important to you. Therefore, make use of this. Be aware of this. Answer your question in the report format. And then what is the report format? Okay. There is no definite format for report, as long as you at the very beginning to the chairman of the board or to the board of directors, and then the date, and then the title, reference. What is the topic? Compliance risk discussion on report on compliance risk management and the compliance risk of the company, and that's it. And then at the end, you come up with prepared and submitted by company secretary, and that's it. You can get as long as it is you will be deemed as already satisfies the requirement for a report format. Okay. Report format will give you 1 mark, a very critical 1 mark. And then the second one, assessing compliance management is linked to risk management and compliance risk. Okay, you assessing compliance prepare assessing the compliance management is linked to risk management and compliance risk to ensure key individuals and team understands their responsibility, including the assessment of role and compliance. Okay, you need to assess, keep an account the compliance management. What is the compliance management of the company? What are the failures? You need to discuss about the failures of the. Another question is that another issue is that you need to answer a question by always reference to the case, because it is a case study. Okay, you always answer the question by reference to the case, assessing the compliance management. What are the compliance management? What are the failure? Okay, what are the failure of the compliance management, existing failures of the company? And then what should be assessing the compliance management? What should be a compliance management system be? What should a compliance management system be? What should it be? Okay, what are the key components? And then it's linked to risk management. What is the relationship? Discussion. What is the relationship between the compliance management component first, and then what are the relationship, the compliance management and the risk management? Okay. Because therefore you can discuss as I have in the PowerPoint or in the study material that okay, our compliance risk is the important part of the risk, and also therefore if you can control come up with a risk effective risk management system, then you can help in maintain a good effective risk management. Okay, and also you can discuss the internal control is risk and also compliance risk is an important part of the risk. Okay, as you can discuss, for example, compliance risk is a part of the risk, and then the hazard category, important part of the categories of risk, compliance risk, hazard risk, control risk, and also speculative risk or opportunity risk. Okay, and you can discuss these categories of risk, and then ensure the key individuals and teams understands their responsibility. Then you can discuss who are the parties, role and duties, role and duties of the compliance management. Role and duties, of course, from the auditor or from the board of directors, of course, ultimately responsible for the compliance, and then the team management, and also the compliance executive, right? The compliance manager, officer, they come together. There is compliance, and also the risk, the governance executive, the company secretaries. Okay, the audit committees, the risk management committee. Okay, and because the audit committees they have the responsibility for internal control, right? Internal control is a very important part for the compliance risk control and the risk management. And also the risk committee, if it is a standalone, it will also has the role and duties to handle the compliance risk. It depends on the situations of the company. Okay, and also the compliance. You also discuss about other members, or in the companies. Actually, all the members of the companies has to be risk compliance risk aware, and then is the culture of the company, and also the stakeholders. Therefore you have to discuss one by one, and then of course you cannot spend a lot to write a big paragraph for each. You have to mention it, highlight it, discuss it in a short paragraphs, and then finally is the culture, and also the resources should be enough for allocation for the compliance. Okay, that is for for this question. Okay. Another one, the second one, a very interesting question. Zita has called you unexpectedly. She has been talking to her colleague, and it appears that the golf match with the subcontractor, Leakey, has been extended to 3 days, including rooms at a 5-star hotel and tickets to a professional golf match. Leakey is the subcontractor of the company. Okay, subcontractor, and then to a professional golf match on the second day at a championship golf course nearby. Although very experienced, the project director is known in the organization as someone who likes to do things his own way. Without consultation, the project director has accepted the invitation on behalf of the organization. You know nothing of this. Zita has asked you as a company secretary to provide you advice on the situation. All right. And then the third paragraph, the key point, analyze the emerging risks relating to the supply chain and the change invitation from the subcontractor, Leakey, so that you can report. You can report back to Zita, including the analyst, at least 3 of the risk trends that relating to the invitation and the behavior of the project director and how this might impact on PPL. Okay, PPL is the company, of course, and Zita is the chairman of audit committee, of the audit committee, right? Is the independent director, and then you is the company secretary. Okay. Here the question is, the subcontractor is trying to make an offer, 3 days golf, and including rooms at a 5-star hotel and tickets to a professional golf match. For example, the golf professional golf tournament match, and on the second day, of course, it will charge a premium price, right? At a championship golf course nearby. Okay. The first paragraph indicates that the subcontractor is trying to offer, making a luxurious offer, to the company, and then it's up to the company to accept, the executive to accept it or not, right? And therefore, the subcontractor try to offer this luxurious reception, entertainment to the executive in order to ensure the bidding can be successful. Okay, and then the second paragraph, the project directors, one of the executive, right, the management team member, accept the offer without taking into account, and then it also is someone who likes to do things his own way, indicating it's a behavior problem, right? Therefore, we have to identify the issue. What are the problems? Without consultation, the project director has accepted the invitation on behalf of the organization. Of course, project directors cannot make decision on behalf of the company. It is right. It is beyond their authority. Beyond the authority limit. You know nothing this. You know nothing of this, and Zita has asked you as company secretary to provide your advice on the situation. What is your advice? What are the problems? Can you identify the problem? Okay, analyze the emerging risks relating to the supply chain and the changed invitation from the subcontractor, Leakey, so that you can report back to the Zita, including the analysis, at least 3 of the risk trend. You need to answer 3 of the risk trend. They relate to the invitation and the behavior of the project and how this might impact on PPL. What is the problem? I think the risk item that you can identify immediately is the corruption risk, right? Corruption risk. and therefore a lot of discussion can be come out based on the corruption risk. And also the relationship between the subcontractor, the supplier chain, what are the problem from the supply chain? Okay, therefore you can discuss this in these areas. Okay. Remember, I think we have covered this. That is for a company, for listed companies. Usually, in the examinations, they will make use of the listed companies. I will be surprised if the case is not based on a listed companies. Okay, it is a listed companies, and that means it is under Section 9 of the Chapter 200, prevention of bribery. 201 it should be Chapter 201, prevention of bribery. PBO, prevention of bribery. Ordinance of bribery prevention. PBO, prevention of bribery ordinance. Prevention of bribery ordinance. 防止賄賂條例. Okay. And then the ordinance also provided required that the directors or the management, okay, because of under the fiduciary duties, cannot accept third party benefit, which may affect their decision making. Okay, and also external benefits include luxurious offer, 過於奢華嘅款待. Okay, of course there is no clear definition, no clear line, but this kind of 5-star hotel tickets of a professional golf is likely to be a luxurious offer, and therefore it is a corruption risk because Licky try to make offer to the executive and make it more becomes a very close friends, and also it can have an influencing power to influence the subcontraction bidding. Okay, this one part. And then for the discussion, what is the emerging risk? Analyze the emerging risk. What is you need to discuss the emerging risk. That means you need to come up with a definition. Emerging risk is instead of a principal risk. Principal risk is the existing risk in the risk register or risk profile of the company. Emerging risk is the risk that is not yet a principal risk, but it may come out with in the form of emerging risk. In a form of principal risk. It's not yet a principal risk, but it may come out, and it's likely to come out. Therefore, once it come out a principal risk, it will have a significant effect on the risk situation of the company. Therefore, the emergent risk as well as the principal risk are the risk item to be recorded in the risk register, and therefore it has to be monitored and review on a yearly basis or even half-yearly basis. Okay, we have to come up with this definition in a discussion. And then relating to the supply chain and the change invitation, you can identify at least three that is required in the question, at least three of the risk trend. The first one is the supplier chain risk. That is the supplier chain risk, for example, supply chain, for example, timely delivery, whether it's timely delivery, whether it's a bidding price rating, whether quality issue, delivery quality issue, whether contract default, whether capacity problem. This is a supply chain risk. Price rating example. And then another one is a corruption risk. Corruption risk is whether any supply manager receive kickback, whether bidding price rating, whether other corruption issue. This is a corruption issue. And then the final one is the behavioral risk. You can refer this in the study material. Behavior is individual management team member or operational member, they have the behavioral problem. They want to alone to do things his own way. Without consultation, and project director accepted the invitation. I think 獨立特行 behavioral problem, behavioral risk. Typical example, ignore the policy or the procedure, consider individual interest instead of the whole team, failure to participate in the whole team work, aggression or bullying, etc. These are behavioral problems. You can identify at least three items, three risk items, and discuss the trends of relating to the invitation and behavior and how this might impact on PBL. You can discuss, identify this, and evaluate this, and then to what extent it may affect the listed companies. Okay, analyst. Okay, and therefore it is for this question too. It is not required to be in the report format. Okay, I think we have discussed the past paper. That will be the end of this section 1B. Okay, and then for next session is section 2A. Okay, I will also cover chapter 9 to chapter 10, chapter 11, or chapter 12 of the study material. And then I will also discuss again the past examination paper. If I can have more time, I can discuss more about the past examination paper. I will discuss the latest one, April or May in the first past examination paper in 2024. That is June 2024. Okay. Okay, if you have time, you can go through the past examination paper, the case first, and so that you can get along with this when we discuss this. Okay, this is finished for this section 1B, part 4, and the past examination paper discussion.